Now, Gawker reports that Google is now blocking some of their AdSense ads from appearing on WorldNet Daily because of its obsession with black mobs. According to Gawker, Google cited its AdSense policies against using derogatory racial and ethnic slurs refer to an individual or group. Well, how did WorldNet Daily respond? They pretty much said, well, we're going to block Google ads on our black mob stories and get other people to put in ads. Joe Farah, CEO of WorldNet Daily, wrote that the Google policy is flawed because, quote, attempts to censor words and phrases that are hurtful and inaccurate from First Amendment protected media on the basis of political correctness and faulty algorithmic methodology. Google is clearly assigning motives to our reporting on the basis of the linking of two words, black mobs, euphemisms for two perfectly accurate words, which must now be found because Google has determined the linking of these two words is hate speech. When one of the most powerful media companies in the world starts banning words and phrases and imposing its speech police standards on all those it does business with, we are headed down a dangerous Orwellian slippery slope. The term black mobs, as used in the more 670 WorldNet Daily reports, is not a pejorative term. He continues, the idea that WorldNet Daily somehow has racist motivations is bizarre, especially when fully 20% of the site's regular weekly columnists are black. Yes, we're not racist, we have black friends. And columnists. What do you guys think about this already? Dan, go ahead.
Okay, this is like I was being polite, Canadian, like to see if anyone else wanted to jump in on WorldNet Daily. This is an interesting topic. I'll let everybody go around on how stupid they are, but I would like to get back to the greater point of the Google sort of censoring thing. I mean, this is just an obvious example of racism. There's no way, I don't think they're fooling anybody. But it is an interesting conversation about the internet and somehow that there are these giant companies that we're all funneling through, and they really do have a lot of control on speech. So this is a situation where I think I'm assuming most of the panel is going to agree that this is obviously racism and we have no problem with it. But his paranoia craziness doesn't apply here. But I think it's an interesting conversation to have about, is this concerning in a broader sense? I personally don't think it is, because I think that it's fairly cut and dry, these cases of what is obviously too far and ridiculous. And also, it is the internet, so there's 1,000 different ways to get fundraising or money through advertising. So, just because you are going through Google, the question becomes, they are the biggest players sort of to get AdWords and AdSense through, so you are losing out a lot of money. I'll let the panel talk about, WorldNet Daily, though, and their craziness.
All right. Sean, go ahead.
Yeah, so we all know why WorldNet Daily uses the terminology black mobs every time they show, a group of people who happen to be African American doing something, or who happen to look African American doing something. But I'm kind of on their side in the sense that Google is basically censoring them based on the context of their stories, or more accurately, the context of their headlines, right? And we all know that headlines can be misleading, and they're meant to draw attention to something. But it's one of those cases where I get what they're saying in principle, that Google shouldn't be, they shouldn't be like censoring them. But on the other hand, this is obviously a racist headline. It's meant to get a certain kind of people looking for something, and the fact that WorldNet Daily says that they have 20% of their columnists that happen to be black is irrelevant to me. It's obvious what you're trying to do. I've seen I run into this kind of on YouTube. If I'm trying to watch a video of something that happened at a Walmart, or something that's a follow-up story on something from the Young Turks, I'm trying to find the link, and I don't want to click on it because it has a racist headline. So I can understand why advertisers don't want to advertise under something. So, all in all, I think it's slippery slope with Google, but I understand why the companies that advertise through Google wouldn't want their products being displayed under articles like this. So I'm a little mixed.
Jordan, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm glad Sean said some of the things he said because he did kind of sway me a little bit. Because this to me goes to like the classic, like just thing that conservatives do, where they show how much they don't understand the First Amendment. Like whenever a private company decides what content it wants to be associated with, that's not a violation of the First Amendment. But that said, Google, while still not a public entity, it's not a government entity. They have every right to do what they want. They are where most people in America at least get their information from. Like they're undeniably king of the search engines. And if this was going the other way, like if this was a liberal site getting censored like this, like I would probably get my dander up about it. But I mean, at the end of the day, whether or not I think it was kind of like what we talked about with the whole Comcast merger and whatnot and throttling stuff. Like whether or not I think it's a good thing. I mean, Google's got every right to do this. They're a private company. They get to dictate how they make their money. Like, let them do what they want to do. Also, you're WorldNet Daily. You're not even Fox News, man. Like, I almost hate talking about this because we're lending credence to WorldNet Daily, which is just an insane website. But so yeah, I mean, Sean raised some good points. Like, you don't want to give the people who control our data too much leeway and how much they're able to fetter that data out to us. That even if they're a private company, that's certainly true. But I mean, don't make it out like you're having your American rights taken away from you, man. Google's a private company. They can do what they want. If you want to be on their website and they don't want you to, suck it. That's what they get to do.
Yeah, and that's really kind of the question that I wanted to go to is do they have the right to do it? Does Google have a right to withhold its advertising? Remember, it's not really censoring. It's just saying that we're not going to put ads on your crazy articles. And so for me, I think that they have the right to do that. Because, like I said, it's not censoring their articles. It's just saying we're not going to put our advertisements on your site.
Yeah, but I mean, they're not technically saying that they're censoring them, but they're trying to deter that action. So, like, if this was a government entity and they were doing this, and it's not a government entity, this would be called chilling free speech because they're indirectly trying to get you to change what you're saying. So, like, they're not censoring it, like.
Right.
In that sense, and I get that they have the right to do whatever they want. What would probably put me more over the top against Google is if they were like removing WorldNet Daily from their search engine, right? Because Google also sometimes will delist sites from their news search engine, and I think that would be a little bit more like over the top. But if they're saying, look, Google and AdSense work together to help people advertise on the internet, and people who are advertising don't want their stuff on what seems like racist material, and we're not going to deliver that. That's perfectly fine. It's just it bothers me when anybody is punishing anybody for content, but like they have every right to do so.
I'm just going to jump in here for one quick second, and that is, I'm going to play devil's advocate a little bit with just to preface this with this. This situation is clearly racism, and so for me, the thing that I like to bring up sometimes to a lot of my comedian friends or whatever is, I'm okay with censorship if it's really stupid. And so, like, yes, you know what? You could technically say this is censorship, but it's also racism. And I think as a society, there are several things we can agree on that we don't actually think deserves, being published. Racism would be on my list, quite near the top, actually. So even if you don't agree with that, I'll flip to the other side, which is this. I do think it is censorship, and I've never bought into the argument of, not in this specific case, I think it's censorship, but I think it's okay. But I also think it is censorship. That being said, take a look at how people make money on the internet, and I think that is the key to it. And these guys have a ton of power. And that is something that you have to think about. Like, with ad dollars, there's two things that are really interesting, I think, with journalism and online any kind of blog or whatever, is it's causing two things to happen. One, the players at the top really get to control where you're placed on the internet, who sees you, even your popularity. Facebook rejiggering their algorithm literally changes thousands of these aggregates of, we were joking off the top of like starting this show for you guys being like 4 guys and you won't believe what they're going to say tonight. Those kinds of titles, Facebook fools around with that and takes away traffic from Upworthy and throws it to BuzzFeed because BuzzFeed's wink wink nudge nudge paying Facebook some extra cash here to promote their stuff. And these sort of things really do sort of shape what you see on a daily basis. So I think it is important to be aware of how this matters. It does matter a lot to WorldNet Daily, whether you think they're crazy or not. Google Ads not promoting them, that's a huge chunk of revenue, and that's how they run their business. That being said, I think they're racist, so I do think Google's in the right to say, and advertisers are in the right to say, we don't want to be there. But keep in mind, this is a couple of steps away from what we saw on television in the last 30, 40 years, where a right-wing group gets really upset about Bill Maher on being on ABC or insert whoever you want to, and all of a sudden stations are pulling out because ads companies fall apart under the pressure of a few wackos. So there is sort of this I think larger narrative that you have to be careful of. Agree, disagree?
No, I think you do make some really good points, about like ad dollars and how much control they have in a financial way. But I still can't really call it censorship, at least in the original term, or at least in the way that they're trying to put it, because they're trying to say that we're being stifled.
But does anybody in the modern era actually get stifled? Like, when was the last time somebody was just like, you literally can't speak? The way we stifle people now is by, rejiggering an algorithm against them, or by saying something like, oh, we're going to take your ad dollars away. Like, we had something up in here in Canada, which is a similar idea, where we make a lot of our films on grants. The government turned around because of a right-wing preacher who got a lot of groups together and because of one film and said, first you have to make your film, then we'll give you the grant if we accept the film. And that, isn't directly censorship, but obviously, if you don't have the money up front.
You bring up the point that it's through the government grants. The government isn't,
that's how it works up here, that's all I'm saying. The GAR system up here.
That's true. But another fun thing about WorldNet Daily is they are actually claiming that their free speech, that their First Amendment rights are being violated, which is ridiculous. So I want to point that out. I
love that you have the freedom of speech laws that you have in the States. We don't have them up here. We don't have the protection of satire like you have down there. So I always lean to to protect all of that as broad as it can. Just this situation, in my opinion, is purely racist. So I'm not you can't be racist and not expect advertisers to leave you. You're not hiding it. There's 670 articles that start the same way. You're obviously pushing something.
And you gotta remember, Google could do whatever it wants, and this is really what WorldNet Daily can actually do here, and they won't be all the way wrong, is they could blame the liberals, because the liberals have been doing this, going after TV show hosts, sponsors, and all these people that they don't like. They'll call their sponsors and tell them that they're boycotting them. So Google's just trying to prevent that. So WorldNet Daily, just blame the liberals. Take black mobs out of your headlines, and you'll be all right.
Yeah, but they don't want to take black mobs out of their headlines because that's clickbait.
Yeah, and once again, I know I say this all the time. I thank Sean for bringing up that angle, because I feel like we immediately veered in this story to whether or not Google had a right to do this, and I feel like the issue in the story is WorldNet Daily being racist, and I think we're all unanimous that they're being incredibly racist, and there's no other way around that.
I mean, they're race baiting and appealing to racists 100%, and that makes you a racist. That's just how it is.
The one last angle of this that we haven't covered, which I do think is sort of interesting, and you kind of just hit on it, is I don't know if we have enough conversations in society, especially amongst people who consider themselves media critics and do the media critique shows, is when journalism is in such trouble and the internet in general has changed the game so much and people aren't really sure how to monetize things, we are in an interesting place where this is an extreme example, but I could give you about 20 from Huffington Post just from today where you go, ugh, like you kind of cringe because everyone's in the clickbait game. Everyone's trying to promote. I wouldn't say people are trying to be racist per se in some case, but I definitely would say people are trying to bait the racism sort of angles, and sometimes they're right, but they really are trying to get people angry in the comment sections by how they title something, because that's the game. It's how they make money. You see it on YouTube and in these sections too. Like as Sean was saying, trying to avoid clicking those things, which is really all you can do as a consumer of all this content. But the game, the way journalism is being played right now, it's all about that SEO stuff. It's all about trying to drum up controversy and water cooler stuff. It's like cable news on steroids, and I don't think the internet gets enough slack for some of the journalism that does.
Yeah, and you know there are like tons of misleading titles, misleading article titles. I come across them every time I do a show, and you know every time I prepare for a show, here I am. I'm reading through a bunch of salacious or sensationalist headlines, and of course you've got your Upworthies of the world, which Sean or not Sean, but Jordan hates with a passion, don't you, Jordan?
And to say what Dan and Jeff just said in a dumb way, the headlines are getting worser too.
And there it is. There you have it. Headlines are getting worser.
Yeah, I almost actually, since you did call me out, I almost submitted to you earlier this week if we could cover this, but Facebook has specifically altered its algorithm to just screw Upworthy and sites like that, and I think that's the most amazing thing that's happened to Facebook since Facebook started allowing like pictures.
Well, I do want to, let me just 1 second, Jordan. I want to just, because if you're going to bring that up, this is actually really key. I talked about it on my podcast this week. This is a really big story that's not getting enough attention. Yes, they did that, but they also jiggered it and to help BuzzFeed out. And how BuzzFeed runs their content now as media is I'm going to come to BuzzFeed. I want to get the TYT community show more popular. BuzzFeed's media team creates like 25 top dumb Republicans in a GIF form. They put it through that, and then they buy from Facebook the you know what all of us see on our Facebook pages, which is you should buy this so more people can see it. That's how their business runs. So Facebook's kind of rewarding the companies that are going and buying through them. It's you know, somebody this week actually put an article about it, and then all of a sudden the article went down and came back with much you know, fluffier and flowery language. But the first version of it was basically like, this is the payola scandal for all of you people who are rock and roll nerds from back in the day where Alan Freed got caught, you know, putting on records because record companies were sending him cash. So this is interesting stuff that I think people need to think about. Like, why did Upworthy lose out? Well, maybe it's because we all hate, you won't believe what happens next, but also Facebook's taking money in the back door. That's something to think about. Because that's how our media gets controlled now. How do you, under 40, how does anybody see stories? Very few people are watching television. So that's my 2 cents on that.
And also, I don't know if you guys remember being Rick-roaded back in the day, where you click on a video.
Sure.
And
You mean Rick-rolled?
Yeah, there we go.
Never gonna give you up.
Yeah, so that's basically like those videos got millions and millions of hits, and who would have guessed all the way back then that that would be the model for all internet news?
Rick Astley strikes again.
That's actually brilliant. Rick Astley journalism.
We should start calling it that.
I'm not kidding you. I might use that, Sean. That's good.
You have now coined a new phrase.
I think he has.
Congratulations, sir. Hey, if you enjoyed this clip, make sure to like and leave a comment below, or even share. Sharing is caring. If you want to see more TYT Nation videos, go to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/TYT Nation. Thank you for watching.